about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. Please be seated. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No jury will convict me. The words fall from her lips inside a fluorescent interrogation room in Eureka, California. Police cameras capture every syllable. Jodi Arias sits across from detectives, confident, almost serene. She has no idea that a waterlogged camera recovered from a washing machine in Mesa, Arizona, has already condemned her. The digital files survived deletion attempts and water damage. They tell a story in timestamps, intimacy, then terror, then death. June 4th, 2008. Travis Victor Alexander, 30 years old, motivational speaker and devout Mormon, lies dead in his shower. 29 stab wounds, a slit throat, a gunshot to the head. To the world, Jodi Arias was a quiet photographer with a gentle smile. To Travis Alexander's family, she became the embodiment of obsession wrapped in charm. Their relationship spanned continents of emotion, from passionate romance to restraining order-level stalking. The scope of her crime is singular but profound. One victim, one house, one day that would launch a trial watched by millions. Why the notoriety? Because every detail was documented, because the camera couldn't lie for her, because America watched a murder trial become a media circus, and at its center was a woman who believed her story would overcome forensic reality. Born July 9th, 1980, in Salinas, California, Jodi grew up in a household she would later describe as troubled. No documented history of violent crime in her youth. She dropped out of high school, drifted through jobs, converted to Mormonism after meeting Travis in 2006 at a business conference in Las Vegas. Their relationship ignited quickly, too quickly. When Travis tried to end it in 2007, Jodi couldn't let go. She moved from California to Mesa to be near him. She hacked his social media accounts. She appeared uninvited at his home. Friends noticed, Travis noticed, but he couldn't fully sever the connection. The path to murder was paved with late-night visits, jealous rages, and a possessiveness that turned pathological when Travis began dating other women. She slashed his tires twice. She sent anonymous threatening emails to women Travis dated. She broke into his house through a doggy door. The pattern was escalation without intervention. Each boundary violation met with temporary distance, then reconciliation, then deeper entanglement. The crime itself unfolds in a bathroom that becomes a killing floor. June 4th, 2008. Jodi drives from California to Arizona, dyes her hair brown, rents a car, turns off her cell phone during the drive. She arrives at Travis's house. They have sex. The camera documents it. Time-stamped photographs recovered from the deleted files. Then something shifts. An argument, perhaps. Rejection. At 5:29 p.m., the camera captures Travis alive in the shower, water streaming over his body, vulnerable and unaware. At 5:30 p.m., the first images of the attack appear, blurred, accidental shots as the camera tumbles during the violence. 29 stab wounds, concentrated on his back, torso, and hands. Defensive wounds show he fought desperately. His throat is slashed so deeply it nearly decapitates him, severing his airway and major blood vessels. A .25 caliber bullet enters his head above the right eyebrow. The most disturbing aspect isn't the brutality, it's the staging afterwards. Jodi drags his body back to the shower, attempts to clean the scene, throws the camera in the washing machine with towels and bedding, then drives to Utah to meet another man as if nothing happened. She attends a work event. She kisses the other man. She acts normal while Travis's body decomposes in the Arizona heat. The camera tells the truth she tries to wash away. The timestamps don't lie. The blood patterns don't forgive. Mesa Police Department detectives begin with a missing person report from Travis's friends. They find his body 5 days later, decomposing in his shower. The house reeks of death. Blood patterns tell a story of pursuit, from the bathroom to the hallway and back. The washing machine contains the digital camera, towels, and the gun used in the murder. Forensic analysis reveals deleted photographs, including one showing Jodi's leg and foot, time-stamped during the murder. A bloody palm print matches her hand. Her hair is found in dried blood. the digital evidence is overwhelming. On July 15th, 2008, police arrest Jodi at her grandparents' home in Eureka. She's calm during the interrogation. She tells 3 different stories. First, she wasn't there. Then, masked intruders killed Travis. 2 people, a man and a woman, who broke in during a robbery. Finally, self-defense. He attacked her in a rage after she dropped his camera. She fought back. The camera's timestamp exposes every lie. Detective Esteban Flores methodically walks her through the contradictions. She maintains composure, even doing a headstand in the interrogation room during a break. The trial begins in January 2013 in Maricopa County, Arizona. Cameras broadcast every moment. Prosecutor Juan Martinez methodically dismantles her self-defense claim using forensic evidence, the photographs, and her own conflicting statements. Jodi testifies for 18 days, describing alleged abuse, sexual humiliation, and fear. She claims Travis was a sexual deviant who used her. She describes incidents that cannot be corroborated, but the physical evidence contradicts her timeline. The jury sees the photos. They hear the lies. The medical examiner testifies that Travis was likely stabbed first, the gunshot coming last, contradicting Jodi's claim that she shot him first and doesn't remember the stabbing. On May 8, 2013, they convict her of first-degree murder. The penalty phase ends in a deadlock. They cannot unanimously agree on death. A second penalty phase jury also deadlocks in 2015. Judge Sherry Stevens sentences Jodi to life in prison without the possibility of parole on April 13, 2015. She is currently incarcerated at Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville. Travis's family gave victim impact statements describing a brother, son, and friend stolen by jealousy. His sister Samantha said, "Travis was the glue that held us together. She didn't just kill Travis, she killed part of all of us. His name was Travis Victor Alexander. He sold legal services and prepaid legal insurance. He mentored children through his church. He believed in redemption and second chances. The camera remembered him at his most vulnerable and saved the evidence that brought justice. Was this a crime of passion or calculated murder? The timestamps suggest premeditation, the dyed hair, the rented car, the deleted photos, the gas can she filled to avoid using her credit card in Arizona. The brutality suggests rage beyond control. Perhaps both are true. Obsession doesn't require logic. It requires only the belief that if I can't have you, no one can. From a bathroom in Mesa where a camera refused to forget, we move to another interrogation room where a single sentence destroyed a defense.
I feared him. I felt like I needed to do what he was telling me to do.
I gave him the nose job he wanted. The words spill from Shayna Michelle Hubers' mouth inside an interrogation room in Highland Heights, Kentucky on October 12, 2012. She's just called 911, claiming self-defense after shooting her on-again, off-again boyfriend, attorney Ryan Carter Poston 6 times in his condominium. Detectives watch as she laughs, hums, and makes the statement that will haunt her trial. Ryan lies dead on his kitchen floor, shot in the head, torso, and arms. He was 29 years old, a graduate of the University of Kentucky College of Law, preparing to meet another woman for dinner that night. Shayna couldn't let him go. To those who knew her, Shayna Hubers was intelligent, poised, a psychology student at the University of Kentucky with a 3.9 GPA. Behind closed doors, the relationship with Ryan was turbulent, marked by breakups and reconciliations that grew increasingly toxic. The scope: one victim, one night, one condo in Highland Heights where jealousy and rejection collided with a loaded handgun. The notoriety came not from the method, but from her words, callous, strange, self-incriminating statements captured on police video that would be played in courtrooms and across news networks. This was a case where the killer's own voice became the prosecution's most powerful weapon. Born in Lexington, Kentucky in 1991, Shayna showed no documented history of violence before meeting Ryan Poston in 2011. She was academically successful, attractive, social, but the relationship revealed patterns of possessiveness and emotional volatility. Friends described constant texting, calls at all hours, jealousy when Ryan spoke to other women. Ryan tried to end it multiple times. She would threaten self-harm, show up unannounced, refuse to accept the breakup. Co-workers at Ryan's law firm noticed her appearing at his office uninvited. She would wait in the parking lot. She tracked his movements through social media. By October 2012, Ryan had begun dating someone else, Audrey Bolter, a woman he planned to take to dinner the night he died. Shayna knew the path to murder was paved with final straw rejection, the kind where being replaced feels worse than being alone. Ryan had told friends he was afraid of how Shayna would react. He changed his locks. It didn't matter. She had a key. October 12th, 2012, approximately 8:30 p.m. Ryan's condominium in Highland Heights. 6 gunshots from a .380 caliber handgun Ryan kept in his home for protection. Shayna claims Ryan became enraged when she told him she was leaving, grabbed her by the shoulders, shook her violently, and she shot him in self-defense. The forensic evidence tells a different story. Ryan is shot in the face, the back of the head, the chest, the arms, the torso. Ballistics analysis shows he was likely sitting at his kitchen table when the first shot was fired, not attacking. Stippling patterns and trajectories suggest he was shot, fell, or crouched, and was shot again as he tried to move or protect himself. The 6 shots indicate execution, not defense. 1 bullet entered through his nose, another through his cheek, 1 through the back of his head as he was down. The most disturbing detail comes after the shooting. Shayna calls 911 at 8:49 p.m., tells the dispatcher she feared for her life and shot him, then sits in the condo for hours during police questioning. On video, she paces, examines herself in a mirror, checks her makeup, makes statements like, "I shot him enough times to kill him," and the now infamous nose job comment, a reference to Ryan's past mention of wanting cosmetic surgery. When asked if she's okay, she says, "I'm okay. He's the one who's dead." It's not remorse. It's something colder. She tells detectives she gave him the nose job he wanted because one of the bullets went through his nose. She later says, "I did it. Yes, I killed him." Highland Heights. Police department responds to the 911 call and finds Ryan's body on the kitchen floor, surrounded by shell casings and blood. They interview Shayna immediately. She appears calm, almost detached, alternating between tears and bizarre comments. Detectives notice inconsistencies in her story. She claims he attacked her, yet there are no defensive wounds on her body, no bruising, no signs of a struggle except the bullet wounds on Ryan. The gun is found at the scene, registered to Ryan but used by Shayna. Forensic evidence, blood spatter, bullet trajectories, and the positions of shell casings contradicts her self-defense narrative. She demonstrates how she shot him, mimicking the action. She tells them, "He was pointing his finger at me." A finger is not a deadly weapon. They arrest her that night. The first trial in 2015 results in a conviction for murder and a sentence of 40 years to life. However, a juror's failure to disclose a prior domestic violence incident in his past leads to the verdict being vacated on appeal. The retrial begins in 2018. Prosecutors present the video evidence, the forensic analysis, and testimony from Ryan's friends describing Shayna's obsessive behavior. The defense argues Ryan was emotionally abusive, that he humiliated Shayna, that she snapped under pressure. But the jury sees the interrogation footage. They hear her laugh. They hear the nose job comment. They see her fix her hair in the mirror. On August 28, 2018, the jury convicts her of murder. Judge Daniel Zala sentences her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum term under Kentucky law. As of 2025, Shayna Hubers remains incarcerated at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women. Ryan Poston's family established a scholarship in his name at the University of Kentucky College of Law. His father spoke at sentencing. Ryan was kind, brilliant, and had his whole life ahead of him. He wanted to be a partner in his firm. He wanted a family. She took that away because she couldn't accept that he didn't want her. Ryan's mother, Lisa. Carter said through tears, "She not only killed my son, she mocked him as he lay dying." Can a single sentence reveal intent? Legally, no. But human instinct knows mockery when it hears it. The nose job comment wasn't evidence of guilt, the bullets were, but it revealed a mind capable of turning death into dark humor. From Kentucky, where words betrayed a killer, we travel to London, where a confession ended the argument before it began. It is obvious that when I shot him, I intended to kill him. London, 1955. Ruth Ellis stands in the dock at the Old Bailey, composed, blonde, 28 years old. The question before the court is intent under British law. Her answer is unequivocal. David Moffat, Drummond Blakely, 25, lies dead outside the Magdala Public House in Hampstead, shot 4 times on the evening of Easter Sunday, April 10th, 1955. There are eyewitnesses. There is a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver. There is a woman who did not run, who waited for police, who told them exactly what she had done. Ruth Ellis will become the last woman executed in the United Kingdom, a case that ignites a national debate on capital punishment and domestic violence that the law was not yet equipped to hear. To the public, Ruth was glamorous, a nightclub hostess and model whose platinum hair and elegant features graced the Hampstead social scene. To those who knew her privately, she was a woman trapped in a cycle of violence with David Blakely, a wealthy racing driver whose charm dissolved into cruelty behind closed doors. The relationship was marked by physical abuse, humiliation, public arguments, and reconciliations that never lasted. The scope: 1 victim, 1 Easter Sunday, 1 street corner in London where jealousy and rage found a revolver. The notoriety comes not from the method, but from the aftermath, a legal system that saw murder in black and white, a woman who confessed without mitigation, and a hanging that haunted a nation for decades. Born Ruth Nielsen on October 9, 1926, in Rhyl, Wales, she grew up during wartime in a household marked by her father's violence and instability. Her father, Arthur Nielsen, was a cellist who became abusive when he drank. She left school at 14, worked in factories, became pregnant at 16 by a French-Canadian soldier who abandoned her. The child's father disappeared. She moved to London, worked as a hostess in nightclubs where men bought attention by the hour. In 1950, she married George Ellis, a dentist whose alcoholism and violence mirrored her father's. He beat her while she was pregnant. They divorced. By 1953, she was managing the Little Club in Knightsbridge and had met David Blakely. He was upper class, educated at Shrewsbury School, charming, emotionally volatile, and physically abusive. Friends described a relationship where David would hit her, humiliate her in public, disappear for days to race cars or drink with friends, then return with apologies and gifts. Ruth became pregnant with his child in 1955. He paid for an abortion, then distanced himself further. The path to murder was paved with betrayal. David's public affair with another woman, his refusal to see Ruth, her growing realization that he would never marry her or acknowledge her worth. On Good Friday, April 8, 1955, David refused to see her. She called his friend's flat repeatedly. He wouldn't come to the phone. By Easter Sunday, rejection had curdled into Tietenzaun. Decision. Easter Sunday, April 10th, 1955. Approximately 9:30 p.m. Ruth waits outside the Magdala pub in Hampstead, where David is drinking with his friend Clive Gunnell. She carries a .38 Smith & Wesson revolver given to her by a man named Desmond Cuson, a friend and former client whose role in providing the gun will remain murky. When David exits the pub and walks toward his car, Ruth approaches. "David," she calls. He turns. She fires. The first shot misses. David runs toward his car. She follows, firing again. 4 bullets strike him, 2 in the back, 1 in the hand as he raises it defensively, 1 in the torso. He collapses on the pavement. A bystander, Gladys Yule, is grazed by a ricochet. Ruth stands over David's body, the gun in her hand, and does not flee. She reloads. No, she doesn't need to. The gun holds 6 rounds. She's fired 4. When an off-duty police officer, Alan Thompson, approaches and says, "Drop the gun," she replies calmly, "Yes, I did it." When police arrive minutes later, she tells them, "I am guilty. I am rather confused." The most disturbing aspect is not the public execution style shooting, it's the calm surrender, as if the act itself was the only logic left. The investigation is immediate and straightforward. Eyewitnesses give statements. The revolver is recovered at the scene. Ruth is arrested on the spot and charged with murder. There is no mystery, no need for forensic breakthroughs. She confesses fully. The only questions are legal. Did she intend to kill? Was there any mitigating circumstance under the law? Police interview Desmond Cuson, who admits providing the gun but claims he didn't know what she planned to do with it. He is not charged. The trial begins on June 20th, 1955 at the Old Bailey before Mr. Justice Havers. It lasts less than 2 days. Prosecutor Christmas Humphreys presents the facts. Premeditation, she brought the gun. Intent, 4 shots, pursuit, and absence of legal provocation. Defense attorney Melford Stevenson attempts to argue crime of passion, diminished responsibility due to emotional distress and recent miscarriage. But British law in 1955 does not recognize battered woman syndrome or coercive control. The Homicide Act of 1957, which would introduce the partial defense of diminished responsibility, has not yet been passed. Ruth herself undermines the defense when she testifies with devastating clarity. When I put the gun in my bag, I intended to find David and shoot him. The jury deliberates for 23 minutes. Verdict: guilty of murder. Under British law at the time, murder carries a mandatory death sentence. Judge Havers dons the black cap and sentences Ruth to hang. On July 13th, 1955, at 9 Swallows a.m., Ruth Ellis is hanged at Holloway Prison by executioner Albert Pierrepoint. She is calm, reportedly saying to the prison staff, "I am quite all right." Her final written statement mentions David's violence, but does not ask for mercy. She refuses to appeal. She becomes the last woman executed in Britain. Public outcry over her case contributes to the eventual abolition of capital punishment in the UK in 1965. Over 50,000 people signed petitions for clemency. The Home Secretary declines. Was Ruth Ellis a cold-blooded murderer or a victim who saw no other escape? The law in 1955 had no vocabulary for the years of abuse, the economic dependency, the psychological imprisonment. It saw a gun, 4 bullets, and intent. Modern legal frameworks might have weighed the context differently. David Blakely's name fades from memory, but Ruth's does not. She becomes a symbol of justice too rigid, of violence unacknowledged, of a woman whose final act of agency was also her last. From a London street where the law could not hear the full story, we move to Worcestershire, where a fabricated story almost worked.
Whoever this person is that was with you, you obviously know him. But he's ruined my life. Please, just tell us who he is.
A woman stands before television cameras, her face etched with grief, her voice breaking. A fat man with staring eyes. He had a baseball bat or a knife. Please, someone must have seen him. December 2nd, 1996. Tracy Marguerite Andrews pleads for witnesses to come forward after her fiancé, Lee Harvey, 25, was found stabbed to death on a quiet country lane in Alvechurch, Worcestershire. The nation watches. Newspapers print her description. Police canvass the area searching for the phantom road rage attacker. Within 2 weeks, the phantom will dissolve, and Tracy will be in handcuffs, her television performance archived as evidence of calculated deception. To the public, Tracy was the traumatized survivor of a random attack, a young woman whose grief seemed genuine. To those close to Lee Harvey, she was possessive, jealous, volatile, a woman who couldn't stand the thought of Lee talking to other women. Their relationship had been marked by public arguments and private violence that friends witnessed with growing concern. The scope: 1 victim, 1 fabricated attacker, 1 country road where jealousy turned fatal, and a lie so bold it required national media to sustain it. The notoriety stems from the brazen public lie, the televised appeal that seemed so genuine, and the forensic evidence that systematically dismantled every word she spoke. Born in 1969, Tracy Andrews showed no documented history of violence until adulthood. She met Lee Harvey, a traffic management worker, and their relationship quickly became intense. Friends described Tracy as controlling, prone to jealousy when Lee spoke to other women, quick to anger over perceived slights. Witnesses at pubs and social gatherings recalled arguments where Tracy would scream and Lee would try to calm her. On the evening of December 1st, 1996, the couple left the Marlbrook pub in Bromsgrove after drinking. Witnesses reported seeing them argue intensely in the parking lot, Tracy shouting, Lee trying to walk away. They drove to a rural lane in Alvechurch, Coopers Hill. What happened next, according to Tracy, was an encounter with a road rage driver who attacked Lee with savage violence. What actually happened was murder, and the only weapon was a penknife from their car. December 1st, 1996, approximately 10:50 p.m. Lee Harvey is stabbed over 30 times with a penknife in a frenzy so intense that forensic pathologists describe it as overkill, far beyond what is necessary to kill. The wounds are concentrated on his face, neck, and chest. His eyes are targeted. His throat is slashed. His face is mutilated. Tracy's story. A driver in a dark Ford Sierra cut them off on the road. Lee got out to confront him. The man attacked with a weapon. She tried to intervene and was knocked unconscious by a punch to the face. The physical evidence contradicts every element. There is no sign of another vehicle at the scene, no tire tracks, no debris. No witnesses see another driver despite the road being near residential areas. Tracy has minor injuries, a small bruise on her face, inconsistent with being knocked unconscious by a large man. Lee's blood is found on Tracy's clothes in patterns suggesting close contact during the attack, not intervention from a distance. A strand of Tracy's hair is found clenched in Lee's hand, indicating he was fighting her, not a stranger. The most disturbing detail is the fabrication itself, standing before cameras, weeping, describing a killer who never existed while Lee's real killer was holding the microphone and begging for justice. West Mercia police initially investigate the road rage angle because Tracy's account is detailed and emotional, but inconsistencies emerge within days. Forensic analysis of blood spatter shows Tracy would have had to be standing over Lee during the stabbing. The blood on her hands and clothes is inconsistent with trying to help him. There are no defensive wounds on her consistent with fighting off a large male assailant, just minor injuries that could be self-inflicted. Detectives re-interview her multiple times. She maintains the story with remarkable consistency, but it fractures under scientific scrutiny. On December 19, 1996, police arrest her for murder. She continues to deny involvement, claiming police are ignoring the real killer. In custody, she writes letters maintaining innocence. The trial begins in June 1997 at Birmingham Crown Court. Prosecutor David Krigman presents forensic evidence. The blood patterns, the hair in Lee's hand, the absence of any other suspect, the lack of physical evidence supporting a road rage encounter. Tracy's defense argues the road rage story, bringing character witnesses who describe her as gentle and loving, but the jury sees the television footage of her performance and compares it to the forensic reality. Pathologist Dr. Richard Shepard testifies that Lee suffered a frenzied and sustained attack with over 30 stab wounds, many inflicted after he was already incapacitated. On July 29, 1997, the jury convicts her of murder. Judge Mr. Justice Buckley sentences her to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 14 years. In 2011, she is released on license under strict conditions, having served her minimum sentence. She changes her name to Tia Carter and attempts to rebuild her life in anonymity. Lee Harvey's mother, Maureen, spoke at the trial. Tracy took my son's life and then lied to the world. Lee was kind and gentle. He loved cars and his family. He didn't deserve to die on a country lane, and his name deserves to be remembered, not the lies she told. How far can a lie travel when the nation wants to believe it, as far as forensic science allows, and no further? Hair, blood, and wound patterns do not lie. They wait, silent, until someone asks the right questions. The British pop band Catatonia released a song called Road Rage in 1998, forever linking the case to popular culture in a way that both immortalizes and trivializes the tragedy. From a country lane in England where a television appeal became evidence, we moved to the Hudson River, where the law struggled to name what happened.
For Christmas, and after spending just 2 weeks in a maximum security prison. Graswald has been in custody for nearly 3 years in the Orange County Jail, while the criminal case that
Cold water, a missing drain plug, a kayak that should have stayed afloat. April 19th, 2015, late afternoon on the Hudson River near Bannerman Island, New York. Vincent Vince Villafor, 46, disappears into the river during a kayaking trip with his fiancée, Angelica Graswald, 35. She paddles to shore. He does not. His body is recovered weeks later. Police find inconsistencies in her story, a missing drain plug from his kayak, and statements she made during an 11-hour interrogation that suggest something more than accident. But proving murder when the weapon is water and the method is ambiguity becomes the challenge that defines this case. To friends, Angelica and Vince were an adventurous couple who loved the outdoors, who kayaked and hiked and embraced nature. To investigators, the relationship had cracks, financial problems, arguments about marriage, a life insurance policy naming Angelica as beneficiary. The scope: one man, one river, one missing plug, and a legal system forced to decide if negligence, recklessness, or murder occurred on that cold April day. The notoriety comes from the grey area, the absence of a smoking gun, the reliance on circumstantial evidence and her own words, and the public debate over whether justice was served or abandoned. Born in Latvia in 1980, Angelica Graswald immigrated to the United States in her 20s, seeking a better life. She worked various jobs, including as a nanny. She met Vince Villafor through mutual friends, and they shared a passion for outdoor activities, hiking, kayaking, camping, but financial stress mounted. Vince owed money. He struggled to find stable work. Angelica was the beneficiary of his life insurance policy worth $250,000. Friends later reported tensions, arguments about money and the future, and Vince's reluctance to commit to marriage despite their engagement. On April 19, 2015, they launched kayaks on the Hudson River despite Coast Guard warnings about cold water temperatures and dangerous conditions. Vince's kayak, an older model he'd owned for years, was later found to be missing its drain plug, a small but critical piece that prevents water from filling the hull. April 19, 2015, approximately 7:00 p.m., the Hudson River near Cold Spring, New York. Water temperature: approximately 46 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause hypothermia within minutes, cold enough that survival time without protective gear is measured in single digits. Vince's kayak takes on water. Angelica later tells police she saw him flip, tried to help but couldn't reach him. He went under. She paddled to shore and called 911 at 8:00 p.m. Vince's body is recovered on May 24, 2015. The autopsy confirms drowning, but investigators focus on the drain plug. It was removed before the trip, according to forensic analysis of the kayak and its storage. During an 11-hour interrogation on April 30, 2015, Angelica makes statements that raise alarms. She mentions feeling free after Vince's death, references the life insurance money, and at one point allegedly says she felt trapped in the relationship. She admits to investigators that she pulled the drain plug out at some point but claims it was weeks before and she forgot to replace it. She also admits to tampering with Vince's paddle, moving the adjustable pieces so it wouldn't lock properly. The most disturbing detail is not what she did, it's what she didn't do. She didn't ensure his kayak was safe. She didn't insist on life jackets in cold water. She didn't call 911 immediately when he went under. Whether that's negligence or intent becomes the legal question. New York State Police investigate, analyzing the kayak, the drain plug, and cold water survival data. They determined that without the plug, Vince's kayak would inevitably fill with water, especially in choppy conditions. Experts testify that an experienced kayaker like Vince would have checked for the plug before launching, unless someone removed it without his knowledge. They recover text messages between Angelica and friends where she complains about Vince and the relationship. She Googles stabs and puncture wounds and other suspicious searches on her phone before the trip. On April 30th, 2015, police arrest her and charge her with second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. The case hinges on her statements during interrogation and the circumstantial evidence of the missing plug and tampered paddle. The case never reaches trial. Prosecutors face challenges: no eyewitnesses, no confession, no definitive proof she removed the plug intending to kill him. In 2017, Angelica Graswald pleads guilty to criminally negligent homicide, a recognition that her actions created a substantial and unjustifiable risk that led to Vince's death, but without the proof the state needed of purposeful murder. Judge Robert Freehill sentences her to 1 1/3 to 4 years in prison. She is released in December 2017, having served time since her arrest with credit for good behavior. Vince Villafor's family is divided. Some accept the plea as the best possible outcome given the evidence. Others believe justice was incomplete. Vince's sister Valerie said, "He loved the water, he loved adventure, he trusted her completely. That trust cost him his life, and she gets to walk free. When does negligence become murder? When the risk is known, substantial and unjustifiable, but intent remains unprovable. The law walks a narrow line, and sometimes it stumbles." Angelica Graswald's case sits in that uncomfortable space where legal outcomes don't satisfy moral intuitions. Some legal experts argue the plea was appropriate given the high bar for proving murder. Others believe a jury should have decided. From the Hudson River's cold ambiguity, we travel to Johannesburg, where self-defense met its legal limits. A kitchen knife, a single stab wound, a bedroom in Johannesburg, South Africa, March 9, 2015, early morning. Nkululeko Flabba, Habedi, 40, a beloved rapper and member of the iconic South African hip-hop group Squatter Camp, lies dying from a chest wound inflicted by his girlfriend, Sindisiwe Precious Mankele, then 31. She calls for help. She claims self-defense. The nation that grew up with Flabba's music watches as the case unfolds, asking hard questions. When is fear reasonable? When does self-defense end and murder begin? To fans, Flabba was a voice of South African hip-hop, a pioneer whose lyrics shaped a generation and brought township stories to national airwaves. To those close to the relationship, it was volatile, marked by alcohol, jealousy, and arguments that escalated behind closed doors. The scope: one man, one stab wound, one bedroom where the boundaries of private defense were tested and rejected by the court. The notoriety comes from the cultural loss a musician silenced and the legal debate over domestic violence and self-defense in a nation grappling with epidemic levels of gender-based violence. Born in the late 1980s, Sindisiwe Mankele met Flabba, and their relationship quickly became intense. Friends describe cycles of fighting and reconciliation, nights fueled by alcohol, accusations of infidelity on both sides. There is no documented history of severe violence prior to March 9, 2015, but the pattern was there: arguments that grew louder, jealousy that festered, a relationship neither could leave. Both had previous relationships that ended badly. On the night of March 8th, they attended a social gathering at Flabba's flat with friends, drank heavily, and argued about another woman. Friends tried to intervene. The argument continued after everyone left. They returned to Flabba's apartment in Alexandra, Johannesburg. The argument continued into the early morning hours, neighbors later reporting hearing shouting and the sounds of things being thrown. March 9th, 2015, approximately 4:30 a.m. A single stab wound to Flabba's chest, penetrating his heart and causing rapid death from internal bleeding. Sindisiwe claims he attacked her during the argument, cornering her in the bedroom, and she grabbed a knife from the bedside table in self-defense. She says the stabbing was an act of protection, that she feared for her life. Forensic pathologists examined the wound. The angle, depth, and force required contradict a defensive panic response. the knife penetrated deeply through the sternum, suggesting deliberate upward thrust with significant force rather than a reflexive push. There are no significant defensive wounds on Sindisiwe consistent with being attacked by a much larger, stronger man. No bruising, no scratches, no signs of a physical struggle beyond the fatal wound. The most disturbing detail is the singularity. One precise wound that ends a life, raising the question of whether it was defense or anger finding. Its mark with lethal accuracy. South African Police Service responds to the emergency call at approximately 5 hours a.m. Flabber is pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators interview Sindisiwe, examine the knife, a kitchen knife found near the body, and photograph the bedroom. The forensic evidence does not support her claim of imminent danger requiring lethal force. There is no evidence Flabber had a weapon or was physically attacking her at the moment of the stabbing. She is arrested and charged with murder. The trial begins in 2015 in the Johannesburg Magistrates Court. Prosecutor Michelle Hart argues that the stabbing exceeded the bounds of private defense under South African law, which requires that defensive force be proportionate and immediately necessary. The defense presents evidence of prior arguments, claims of Flabber's aggression and controlling behavior, and Sindisiwe's fear. Character witnesses describe her as gentle and non-violent, but Judge Jacob Boone rules that even if an argument was taking place, even if Flabber was angry or aggressive, the use of a knife in a manner that caused a fatal stab wound to the heart was disproportionate to any threat presented. On December 11, 2015, he convicts her of murder. She is sentenced to 12 years in prison. In 2022, she is granted parole under supervision by the Department of Correctional Services, having served a substantial portion of her sentence and completed rehabilitation programs. Flabber's family and the music community mourned a loss that resonated across South Africa. His mother said at the trial, "My son had flaws, like all of us. He could be difficult, but he did not deserve to die in his own home. He was a father. He was a son. He made music that brought joy. What is reasonable force when fear is real, but the threat is debatable? South African law, like many legal systems, draws a line. You may defend yourself, but the response must be proportionate to the threat. A single stab to the heart with a kitchen knife exceeded that line, even if fear existed, even if the relationship had a history of conflict. From Johannesburg's legal precision, we move to Ohio, where precision of a different kind, data, speed, and video, convicted a young woman of murder by car.
Whatever's better for you.
The families of Dom and Davion, I'm so deeply sorry. I hope one day.
A Toyota Camry, a service road, a building at the end, no braking, no swerving, just acceleration into a concrete wall at approximately 100 miles per hour. Strongsville, Ohio, July 31st, 2022. The surveillance video is brief and horrifying. The car appears in frame, speeds down the road, and crashes with an impact that sounds like an explosion. Inside are 3 young people, 19-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla behind the wheel, her boyfriend 20-year-old Dominic Russo in the passenger seat, and their friend 19-year-old Davion Flanagan in the back seat. When first responders arrive, Dominic and Davion are dead. Mackenzie is critically injured but alive. In August 2023, Judge Nancy Margaret Russo will call it literal hell on wheels. To classmates and friends, Mackenzie was a typical suburban teenager, active on social media, employed at a retail job, navigating young adulthood. To those who knew the relationship with Dominic, it was toxic. Jealousy, arguments, breakups, and reconciliations that friends watched with concern. The scope, 2 lives, 1 crash, 1 city forced to confront whether a car can be a murder weapon when the intent is data verified. The notoriety comes from the method, vehicular homicide, charged and convicted as murder rather than manslaughter, and the chilling surveillance footage that captured the final seconds. Born in 2004 in Ohio, Mackenzie Sharilla showed no history of violent crime before the crash. Her relationship with Dominic Russo was marked by volatility that friends and family witnessed. They fought over infidelity, jealousy, and control. They broke up and reconciled repeatedly. Social media posts showed the typical teenage relationship drama magnified. On the night of July 30th, 2022, the three friends were together at Mackenzie's residence. Alcohol and marijuana were involved. An argument between Mackenzie and Dominic escalated. Friends later testified they were fighting about another girl Dominic had been messaging. In the early morning hours of July 31st, Mackenzie drove the Toyota Camry to a dead-end service road in Strongsville. Dominic and Davian were passengers. What happened next was captured by surveillance cameras at a nearby business, July 31st, 2022, approximately 5:30 a.m. The Toyota Camry accelerates down Progress Drive, a service road leading to a commercial building. The car's event data recorder, EDR, the black box in modern vehicles, records the final moments, speed increasing from approximately 0 to 100 miles per hour in approximately 5 seconds, throttle at 100%, no brake application, steering input minimal. The car crashes into the brick building of a business called Westwood Commons at full speed. The impact is catastrophic. The building's wall partially collapses. The car is compressed to half its length. Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan die instantly from blunt force trauma, massive internal injuries, skull fractures, chest trauma. Mackenzie survives with serious injuries, including a traumatic brain injury, broken bones, and internal bleeding. The most disturbing detail is the data. No attempt to stop, no swerving, just straight line acceleration into a wall with two passengers who had no control over their fate, no ability to escape, no warning of what was about to happen. Strongsville Police Department and Fire Department respond to the crash site. First responders describe a scene of total devastation. Investigators initially treat it as a tragic accident, perhaps street racing, perhaps impaired driving, but detectives examined the EDR data and the surveillance video. The alignment is exact. Video shows no braking lights. EDR confirms no brakes applied at any point. The throttle was pressed to maximum. The steering was straight. Investigators interview friends who describe the tumultuous relationship, the argument that night, and statements Mackenzie allegedly made in the past about wanting to hurt herself and Dominic. One friend testifies that Mackenzie had previously said, "If we break up, I'll kill us both." Text messages are recovered, showing threats and volatile exchanges. The pattern suggests intent, using the car as a weapon in a murder-suicide attempt where she survived. On August 15, 2022, after extensive investigation and consultation with the prosecutor's office, she is charged with 4 counts of murder, 2 for each victim under different legal theories, felonious assault, and aggravated vehicular homicide. The trial begins in July 2023 as a bench trial. No jury, only Judge Nancy Margaret Russo presiding. Mackenzie's defense team argues for a jury trial, but the motion is denied. Prosecutor Tim Troop presents the EDR data, the surveillance video showing the car accelerating with no braking, and witness testimony about the relationship and Mackenzie's state of mind. The defense argues it was an accident, that Mackenzie lost control of the vehicle or had a mental health crisis or dissociative episode. They present no expert testimony on the EDR data. Judge Russo reviews the evidence meticulously over several days. On August 21st, 2023, she delivers the verdict. Guilty on all counts, including 4 counts of murder. In her sentencing remarks, Judge Russo states, "She had a mission and she executed it with precision. The decision was hers, but the intention was to kill. This was not reckless driving. This was not a kid who got in over her head with drugs and alcohol. She morphed from a young woman into a literal hell on wheels as she used her car as a weapon." Mackenzie Shirilla is sentenced to 2 concurrent life sentences with eligibility for parole after 15 years on each count, with additional concurrent sentences on the other charges. As of 2025, she remains incarcerated in an Ohio prison for women. Dominic Russo's family and Davian Flanagan's family gave impact statements describing young men with futures stolen in seconds. Dominic's father said, He wanted to be an engineer. He loved cars, ironically. He was working toward his future. Davian wanted to make music. He was talented, kind, always smiling. They trusted her. They got in that car. That trust killed them. When does a car become a weapon? When data removes doubt. The EDR doesn't interpret or excuse. It records throttle, speed, braking, steering. It told a story Mackenzie couldn't deny, a story of deliberate acceleration with no attempt to stop. From Ohio's data-driven conviction, we moved to New York, where data of a different kind, bruises, medical records, and a new law complicated the question of justice. A gunshot in the bedroom. Poughkeepsie, New York, September 27, 2017. Nicole Adamando, 29, calls 911 at approximately 5:01 a.m. and tells the dispatcher she shot her boyfriend, Christopher Grover, 34, in self-defense. When police arrive at the residence they share, they find Grover dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Nicole has visible injuries, bruises on her arms and neck, marks consistent with strangulation, a swollen face. She tells investigators Christopher had abused her for years, sexually and physically, and that night she feared for her life. Prosecutors see a different narrative, a woman who killed in anger, not imminent danger. The jury will convict her of murder. But then New York's Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, DVSJA, enters the case, forcing a legal system to reckon with how abuse should weigh in sentencing. Nicole was a young mother of 2 children, employed as a preschool teacher, outwardly functional and committed to her family. Supporters presented medical records documenting years of injuries, hospital visits for vaginal tears and other trauma, photographs of bruises, and evidence they argue proves sustained abuse. Prosecutors contested the timeline and relevance to the shooting that night, arguing the evidence showed past abuse but not imminent deadly threat. The scope: 1 man dead, 1 woman convicted, 1 law designed to recognize that trauma can drive people to fatal decisions. The notoriety comes from the legal innovation, DVSJA as a test case, and the public divide over whether Nicole is a victim or a murderer, or somehow both. Born in 1988, Nicole met Christopher Grover in their teens. According to advocates and court testimony, the relationship became abusive early. Physical violence that left marks, sexual coercion that became routine, control that isolated her from friends and family. According to prosecutors, the evidence of abuse existed but did not justify the use of lethal force on the night in question when Christopher was asleep or incapacitated. Friends and family describe a relationship marked by fear, isolation, and injuries Nicole explained away as accidents or clumsiness. Hospital records show visits for injuries consistent with abuse. On September 27, 2017, an argument escalated. Nicole retrieved a gun Christopher kept in the home and shot him once in the head as he lay in bed. September 2017, 1 gunshot to the head, 1 man dead. The pattern, according to Nicole and her defense team, was years of beatings, rapes documented in medical records, death threats, and terror that left her believing she had no escape and that Christopher would eventually kill her. The state argued she was not in imminent danger at the moment she fired. Christopher was lying in bed, possibly asleep, not actively attacking her. The most disturbing detail depends on perspective. If you believe Nicole and the medical evidence, it's the years of torture she endured, the sexual violence, the choking incidents that could have killed her. If you believe the state, it's the use of lethal force when other options existed, when she could have left, when the immediate threat was not present. Poughkeepsie police investigate, collect the gun, photograph the scene and Nicole's injuries extensively. They document bruising on her neck, consistent with strangulation, bruising on her arms, facial swelling. Medical examiners later review her medical history and find documented injuries over years. Prosecutors charge her with second-degree murder, arguing the shooting did not meet the legal standard for self-defense, imminent threat requiring immediate lethal response. She is arrested that morning. The trial in 2019 ends with a conviction for second-degree murder. The jury hears extensive evidence of abuse. medical records, photographs, testimony from experts on domestic violence. But they conclude it did not justify the shooting at that specific moment. Judge Edward McLaughlin sentences her to 19 years to life. Then advocates invoke the DVSJA, passed in 2019 specifically to allow judges to consider domestic violence as a significant contributing factor in sentencing when there is substantial evidence the abuse was a factor in the crime. On appeal, Nicole's legal team presents additional evidence of trauma. In 2020, her sentence is reduced to 14 years to life, though she remains incarcerated. The legal battle continues as of 2025, with supporters arguing for her release under DVSJA provisions and prosecutors maintaining that murder is murder regardless of history. Christopher Grover's family insists he was not the monster described, that the allegations were exaggerated and that his life mattered. Can justice hold two truths, that abuse occurred and that the response was still unlawful? The DVSJA tries. It says sentencing can acknowledge trauma without erasing accountability. It recognizes that battered women sometimes kill in moments that don't fit textbook self-defense, but are nonetheless driven by years of terror. From a New York courtroom grappling with complexity and competing narratives, we move to Texas, where the weapon was so ordinary it became extraordinary.
Directly at Trujillo.
It has nothing to do with the fact you hit someone 25 times about the face.
Moments before the verdict came in, defense attorney Jack Carroll.
A stiletto heel, 5 inches of leather and metal, pointed and rigid, a University of Houston apartment building. June 9th, 2013, late night. Ana Lilia Trujillo, 45, and her boyfriend, Alf Stefan Anderson, 59, a research professor at the University of Houston, have been drinking heavily at a local bar. An argument erupts after they return to his apartment. What happens next leaves Anderson dead on the floor of his residence, his face and head bearing over 25 distinct wounds inflicted by the pointed heel of Trujillo's shoe. When police arrive, Ana claims self-defense, saying Stefan attacked her and she defended herself. The forensic pathologist counts the injuries and testifies that the number, location, and force far exceed any reasonable defensive response. The case becomes known as the stiletto heel murder, a moniker that overshadows the victim's name and reduces a life to a headline. To neighbors in the Parkway Place condominiums, Ana was social, intense, sometimes loud during arguments. To friends of Stefan, the relationship was volatile and concerning, marked by alcohol and late-night fights that could be heard through walls. The scope: one man, one shoe, one apartment where improvisation became a weapon. The notoriety comes from the oddity of the method and the legal question of whether an everyday object used in frenzy constitutes murder or something less. Born in 1968 in Mexico, Ana Lilia Trujillo immigrated to the United States and worked various jobs over the years. She met Alf Stefan Anderson, a Swedish-born academic who studied reproductive physiology at the University of Houston through mutual acquaintances. Their relationship was brief, only a few months, but turbulent from the start. Friends described alcohol-fueled arguments, jealousy, and volatility. On the night of June 9th, 2013, they went to a bar, drank heavily, and returned to Stefan's apartment around midnight. An argument began over allegations of infidelity or control. Accounts vary. Ana later claimed Stefan attacked her, grabbed her, and she defended herself with whatever was at hand. Her shoe, a blue suede stiletto with a 5.5-inch heel. June 9th, 2013, late evening into early morning. Stefan Anderson is struck repeatedly on the head and face with the heel of the stiletto shoe. The medical examiner, Dr. Janice Townsend Parch, counts over 25 distinct wounds. Some sources report the number as high as 30. The pattern suggests a prolonged, sustained attack, not a single defensive blow or brief struggle. Wounds are concentrated on vulnerable areas: the face, the skull, the temporal regions, areas that indicate continued striking even after incapacitation. The force required to penetrate skin and skull with a shoe heel is substantial, indicating deliberate, forceful blows. The most disturbing detail is the ordinariness of the weapon. a shoe, something in every closet, an item of fashion transformed into an instrument of death through rage and repetition. Blood spatter covers the walls, the floor, the furniture. The scene is described by investigators as unusually violent for a domestic dispute. Houston Police Department responds to a 911 call from the apartment complex around 1:30 a.m. They find Stefan dead in his apartment, blood throughout multiple rooms, and Anna with minor injuries. Small cuts and bruises she claims came from Stefan's attack. She tells officers he was abusive, that she was defending herself. Crime scene investigators photograph the extensive blood spatter patterns, which suggest sustained violence over time rather than a brief defensive struggle. The stiletto heel is recovered as evidence, blood and tissue on the pointed metal tip. She is arrested that morning. The trial in 2014 becomes a media spectacle, with court TV and local stations broadcasting portions. Prosecutor John Jordan presents forensic evidence, the number of wounds, the force required to inflict them, the time it would take to deliver over 25 blows. Medical examiners testify that Stefan would have been incapacitated after the first several blows, meaning the continued striking was unnecessary for defense. The defense argues Stefan was abusive, that he was larger and stronger than Anna, that she feared for her life and struck out in panic. Defense attorney Jack Carroll argues that Anna acted in self-defense and that Stefan's size and strength justified her response, but the jury sees the photographs of the crime scene. They hear the medical examiner describe each wound meticulously. On April 9, 2014, after deliberating, they convict her of murder. Judge Kevin Fine sentences her to life in prison. As of 2025, Ana Trujillo is incarcerated in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Alf Stefan Anderson's colleagues at the University of Houston remember him as a brilliant scientist whose work on reproduction and developmental biology contributed to medical understanding. His research was published in peer-reviewed journals. His sister, attending the trial from Sweden, said, "He was kind. He helped students. He believed in second chances. He did not deserve to die like this in his own home." When does self-defense end? When the threat is neutralized. Every wound after that first defensive blow speaks to something else. Rage, anger, a line crossed from protection to punishment. Texas law requires that defensive force be immediately necessary and proportionate. Over 25 blows with a shoe heel exceeded both requirements. From Houston's improvised weapon and its legal aftermath, we close with a case where delusion built its own scripture and isolation created a killing ground.
I sentence you to 2 life in prison without the possibility of parole sentences at the New Hampshire State Prison, and you are remanded to the custody of the sheriff.
Again, Lamar shows no emotion as she leaves the...
A farmhouse in Epping, New Hampshire. The smell of burning flesh in the air, carried by wind across fields. March 2006. Neighbors call police about the odor, describing it as sickening, persistent, unlike anything they'd smelled before. What investigators find on Sheila Kayla Barr's property rewrites the definition of predator. 2 men are missing. Kenneth County, 24, and Michael Deloge, 37. Both were vulnerable, developmentally disabled, economically struggling, men Sheila lured to her farm with promises of work, shelter, and companionship. What they found was captivity, torture, accusations of unthinkable crimes, and death. Sheila called herself an angel sent by God to punish pedophiles. The farm was her mission field. The victims were her doctrine-made flesh. To some who encountered her, Sheila was eccentric, a woman with strong opinions, an isolated lifestyle, and a farm that seemed perpetually run down. To investigators, she was a serial predator who used charm and manipulation to trap vulnerable men, then subjected them to psychological torture, degradation, and violence before killing them and destroying their bodies. The scope: 2 confirmed murders, a farm that yielded bone fragments and teeth, and a trial where insanity was argued passionately but rejected. The notoriety comes from the method, burning bodies in barrels, scattering remains like refuse, and the delusional belief system that framed murder as righteousness. Born in 1958 in Fort Smith, Arkansas, Sheila experienced documented childhood trauma, sexual abuse by family members, neglect, and instability that marked her early years. She moved frequently, married and divorced multiple times, and eventually settled on a farm in Epping, New Hampshire. She suffered documented head injuries in her 30s and 40s, including a severe one in a horseback riding accident. Defense attorneys would argue these injuries caused brain damage, paranoia, and delusions that destroyed her ability to distinguish right from wrong. She began bringing men to the farm in the early 2000s, often younger men with cognitive impairments, addiction issues, or economic desperation, men who had few other options. She offered them work on the farm and a place to stay, but the farm became a prison. She accused them of being pedophiles based on nothing, forced them to confess to imagined crimes on videotape, subjected them to sleep deprivation, humiliation, forced labor, and physical abuse. Neighbors recalled seeing Kenneth County with visible bruises, looking thin and terrified. He appeared on video recordings Sheila made, confessing under obvious duress to crimes he did not commit while she ranted about God's judgment and her mission to cleanse the world of evil. Then he vanished in March 2006. By 2006, the pattern had escalated to murder. Kenneth County and Michael DeLoge were both dead, their bodies burned in metal barrels on the property in an attempt to destroy evidence. The method was elimination: destroy the body through fire, scatter the remains, deny everything. But bones resist fire. Teeth survive. Human remains do not disappear as easily as killers hope. When police executed a search warrant in March 2006 after Kenneth's family reported him missing, they found bone fragments in burn barrels, dental remains that could be matched, and forensic evidence linking the remains to the missing men. The most disturbing detail is the video evidence, recordings Sheila made of Kenneth, bruised and terrified, forced to recite confessions to sexual abuse of children while she ranted off camera about God's judgment, her divine mission, and her role as an avenging angel. The videos are almost unwatchable. A man broken psychologically, saying whatever he's told to say, while his captor films and narrates with religious fervor. New Hampshire State Police investigate after welfare checks on Kenneth County and concerns raised by his family, who hadn't heard from him in weeks. Forensic anthropologists sift through soil and ash on the property, recovering enough remains to identify Kenneth County and Michael DeLoge through dental records and DNA analysis. Detectives interview former workers and acquaintances who describe Sheila's escalating paranoia, her accusations against men who came to the farm, her increasingly bizarre behavior, and religious rants. She is arrested in March 2006 and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. In custody, she makes statements to guards and cellmates claiming the men were pedophiles who deserved to die, that she was doing God's work. The trial in 2008 becomes a battle over sanity. Defense attorneys argue Sheila is severely mentally ill, delusional, suffering from brain damage due to her head injuries, and incapable of forming the intent required for murder. They present psychiatric experts who testify she genuinely believes she is an angel, that she hears voices, that she cannot distinguish reality from delusion. Prosecutors present the video evidence, the methodical disposal of bodies, the luring of victims over time, and testimony from forensic psychiatrists who argue she knew right from wrong, evidenced by her attempts to hide the bodies and her efforts to avoid detection. The jury hears both sides. On June 13, 2008, they reject the insanity defense and convict her of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Judge Gillian Abramson sentences her to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. As of 2025, Sheila LaBar is incarcerated in New Hampshire State Prison for women. Kenneth County's family spoke at sentencing, describing a young man who struggled with developmental disabilities but deserved dignity, love, and life. His mother said, "Kenny was trusting. He believed people when they said they'd help him. She used that trust to destroy him." Michael DeLoge's family did the same, describing a man who had troubles but was loved. Both men had names, histories, families who searched for them, people who loved them. Sheila turned them into ashes, but the court gave them back their names and their humanity. When delusion becomes doctrine, who survives? No one. Isolation plus grandiosity plus lack of accountability equals a farm where bones teach the only truth left, that monsters are not born in shadows. They are built in daylight, one rationalization at a time, one victim at a time, until someone finally asks where the missing have gone. Across 10 cases spanning 3 continents and 7 decades, a pattern emerges with uncomfortable clarity. Intimacy becomes the killing floor when control matters more than love, when rejection feels like annihilation, when leaving becomes the unforgivable sin. The technologies differ across decades. The forensic tools evolve from revolvers and eyewitnesses to event data recorders and digital timestamps. But the underlying logic repeats with disturbing consistency. When love curdles into possession, when a partner becomes an enemy, when the only perceived escape from rejection is to ensure no one else can have what you've lost. These cases reveal the darkest intersections of human psychology, where attachment disorders meet rage, where abandonment terror meets violence, where control needs override the fundamental recognition of another person's humanity. If you found this exploration into these shocking cases compelling, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Which of these killers do you think was the most disturbing? Share your thoughts in the comments below.